Okay, we are going to learn some things about the anatomy of the egg really quickly.
I'm dead serious. Like I have not heard any of Red's things for a while.
So we are going to start on page 254.
It does. It really does. Like my color would not look good when
When I tell you I
like
looked at that,
it's like
yeah, whatever I say, must I at 1 a.m.
So on page 254, we are going to write in some of the anatomy of the egg, because what we're going to learn with our baby eggs that we created yesterday is buckets. Is we're going to get into some grading. We're going to learn how to candle. We're going to learn how to look for blood spots and imperfections. We're going to learn how the egg operates. We're going to do a lot of stuff with it. But in order to do that, we need to know what it is that we're looking at, right? So we are going to just kind of talk about this for a second, and then we're going to set up our first project with our eggs. So when we're talking about the anatomy of the egg, there's some different stuff going on. Some of these we're just going to write down. Some of these we're going to explain in a little bit more depth. So obviously, the outermost part of the egg is called what?
shell.
The shell, right? From the video, when does that develop? That's the very last thing. That's the very last thing to develop in an egg. So that is the outer shell. It is made up of calcium carbonate. Okay, so it is what you have to make sure your laying birds eat a high calcium diet so they can create hard shells, because if they don't have a lot of calcium in their diet, they actually will, their eggs will be a lot more fragile and they'll break a lot easier. So if you're somebody commercial selling these eggs for a store, that's obviously not gonna be good, right? Because when they roll down that little thing and they go into a little egg elevator and they get ticked for cracks and stuff, they're just gonna be more fragile for the consumer. If you have your own coop, it'd be really frustrating if every time you went to gather eggs, by the time you got into the house, they'd all bursted under each other's weight, right? Because they were so fragile. There's then something called the albumin, okay? A-L-B-U-M-I-N. There's the thin albumin and the thick albumin. That is another fancy word for egg white. So if you want to put that beside it, when you break the egg and you're eating the egg and you know there's the egg white, right? That is also called the albumin. So sometimes when you bake, it asks you to separate the yolk from the white, and you kind of bounce the egg in between the shells to get them separated. When you boil an egg, you can peel the egg white off, right? And so that is in the egg. That is like a fluid, kind of like a shock absorber, to help protect the yolk, because the yolk is basically the embryo of the egg, or it houses the embryo of the egg. So if the yolk gets all scrambled, then if that egg is fertilized, it can't be incubated and become live if that yolk is damaged. So the egg white is really there to kind of help protect the yolk. This is what is called the chalaza. I think that's really fun. Everybody say it together. Chalaza.
Chalaza.
Chalaza. All right. It's these little tiny strings, basically, that attaches to the outside of the egg, and it keeps the yolk in place, okay? So it's kind of like if we took a ball and we put a string through the ball and then we held it from both sides and we went like this, right? And we had two people holding it. You can move the yolk, but again, it's kind of a shock absorption system to protect the yolk. How many of you guys have ever broken open an egg and seen a little white squiggly thing and you say, ew, it's egg sperm?
I've never said egg sperm, but I've seen it.
I've heard people say that before. Or think that it was like, oh my gosh, this egg was fertilized, right? But you guys know that little white thing that's like in the egg when you break it open sometimes? That is the chalaza.
Why is it not in there sometimes?
Just sometimes you can't see it. I think in an older egg, maybe they start to become more transparent. Most of the time you're gonna see it. And sometimes it'll hide under the yolk depending on the way you break the egg. So you might see it in your bowl, you might not. As far as the outside, well, let's do the inside first. You have the germinal disc. So that is the actual physical embryo. All right, this is what will turn to life in an egg. You then have the yolk. The yolk is what kind of is a place for that to develop, kind of like we talk about the embryonic sac in a mammal, right? That's kind of the embryonic sac for the young chicken.
What is it called?
The yolk?
No,
The germinal disc. This, you can just say it's the vitelline membrane. You can just call it the yolk membrane. It's basically, if you were to like poke the yolk, there's like going to be a very small like yellow like skin. If you guys have ever tried to break a yolk, you guys ever tried to stir up eggs and you're trying to break up the yolk and you kind of have to beat at it for a second. So that's because there's a membrane that's holding it all together. So it's a very thin membrane, but once you break that membrane, then you can mix it all up. You then have the inner shell membrane and the outer shell membrane. How many of you guys have ever broken open an egg and you've like uncooked and you've seen like a little skin just inside the shell? You guys ever seen that? Or if you've ever hard boiled an egg and you go to try to peel the egg, like maybe you did this on Easter, you try to peel the shell off and there's like a weird like film inside. That is the membrane. So that is the actual membrane of the entire egg that keeps everything to develop. So when we watched that movie the other day where the yolk develops and they put it in a little plastic bag and then the shell develops around it, the membrane is the little plastic bag.
So it's like our skin.
Yes.
Because we don't have shells.
Right. But if we did, it would be on top of our skin. Yeah, like a turtle. They have skin and then a shell.
Like a turtle. I don't know.
The last part of the egg is super important, and that is what is called the air cell. So the air cell is always going to be on the fat end of the egg, not the skinny pointy end. So this is what's actually developing and moving first, but the chicken rotates it pointy end before it lays it, so that way it's easier to lay. But the air cell is always going to be, so technically the round end of the egg is the top of the egg. We don't ever set them that way because it's pointy, so it feels like that should be at the top. But technically, when you're incubating eggs, you need the round end to be at the top because that is where the air cell is. So you put them in those little turners and they go, to kind of keep them from getting dormant. But that air cell is still always on the top. And what that is when the little chickadee becomes a little fetus, when it cracks, the first thing it's going to crack out of is the membrane, and it's going to find that air cell so it can go and take its first breath right before it really starts working at that shell. Sorry, I watched too much Chicago Fire, and they do that every time they retest to feed somebody. They go, yeah. So that air cell is the first place where they can find that oxygen before, because they really have to work at that shell for a minute when they hatch. This air cell, as the egg gets older, this air cell grows. It gets bigger. So when you have an egg in the fridge, usually they have about 3-week shelf life. I really think you can keep them longer than that, though they'll probably be fine. But if you wonder if it's a bad egg, we'll do this later, but you put it in water, and if it floats, it's a bad egg, and it would float because that air cell has gotten so large that kind of like you can float better in water. If you're ever trying to tread water, trick is to try and like breathe really slow and keep your lungs inflated because then you're more buoyant, right? So you don't have to kick as hard. So same thing with the egg is that air in there makes that egg more buoyant and is going to pull it to the top of a cup of water. Kind of cool? Make sense? Sweet. So today we are going to set up our first lab. So we're going to use these pages on 255 and 256 to guide us for the next few days and some of the things that we do with our eggs, some of our experiments. But one of the things that we are going to do, and if you have done this before, please don't ruin it for everybody else. Don't say what happens. Don't be like, oh my gosh, I know this. If you've done it before, that's cool. Maybe you'll just see it from a different perspective this time. But we are going to do a vinegar egg experiment. So basically, in just a second, we are going to go out and get our eggs. You are going to pick one to sacrifice. So if you drew little faces on it yesterday, you can pick which personality of them you are sacrificing. And you are going to, basically what's going to happen is we are going to sacrifice one of our eggs. I have mason jars over on the side of the room. We're going to put the egg gently in the mason jar, and then we are going to cover it and fill it with vinegar. So we're going to see then how that reacts. If you know what happens, again, let everybody else who hasn't experience it together. But we're going to see some really cool things that happens with vinegar in the egg, and we're going to talk about it later. So what I would like for you guys to do in the next few minutes is you're going to write a hypothesis. Okay, so write down your guess of what you think is going to happen when you put the egg in the vinegar. Raise your hand if you've done this before.
I think I've seen it happen.
I think I know what happened.
Okay,
So,
so
like
if you know what happens, you're probably going to get your hypothesis right. Okay, pat on the back to you. But without talking to people who have done it before, if you haven't seen this done before, or you haven't done before, just kind of take some time and think through what is your wildest guess as to what you think is going to happen when we put this egg in vinegar.
it's cracker beans.
I'm sorry? Wait. You're putting the whole egg in the vinegar. Yep. So go ahead, take 2 minutes while I get some stuff set out. VinEGGs.
VinEGGar.
I think it's take a couple seconds. Write this down, and then we'll kind of get into some other knowledge on it. But I want you to just kind of brainstorm for a second and figure out what you think is going to happen with these eggs. Was it?
Hypothesis are if the Ben stays if this happens,
You can write it again if you want. Also, if you just want to say, I think this is what's going to happen.
Does it have to be 5 sentences? 5 to 8?
No.
That's a lot of sentences.
That is a lot of sentences. Write a good guess of what you think is going to happen. Write why you think maybe it's going to happen.
Then it could have been VinEGG or
Oh, that is a lot better.
VinEGGs.
Listen, I did this when I student taught like 6 years ago. I was not at the top of my creative game.
I would have loved to be in the class when you were a student.
VinEGG.
Like, you're experiencing me at my best right now. Imagine you do.
I would have loved to be like a fly on the wall during those days, just to see what happens.
Me and Mr. Matt Winkle.
What?
Matt Winkle.
Huh?
Wait, where's he from?
Fayetteville?
No, nothing like that.
Mr. Winkle was my cooperating educator. That's who I did my student teaching with. He is now the state FFA advisor.
That's where we're from. Okay, never mind.
Big expectations for you.
Apparently. I'm going to do a little cameo real quick because I'm recording this for our at-home friends. If you're learning from home, hey. I feel really weird doing this.
Did they even say you?
I do have a YouTube channel, actually. We're just supposed to do. Welcome back. If you're doing this from home, feel free to also write your hypothesis right now. And then if you have eggs in your refrigerator that your parents are okay with you doing weird things with, you can also find a jar or a container, probably the seal so it doesn't smell, and put an egg inside of it and see what happens.
Eggs.
I keep forgetting that like things are being recorded and literally in every house literally so no. I'm just like what are you gonna be like? No, somebody's gonna come back and look at him. They're gonna be like,
All right, people who have not seen this done before, if you have seen it, you know, don't answer this question. But people who have not seen this done before, what do you think is going to happen? Share a couple hypotheses here.
I said the egg would explode.
Oh, it's gonna explode. It's gonna go kaboom.
Yeah.
get away the shell.
I don't know.
Okay.
Get away the shell or anything. I don't know.
That's what I said.
Okay.
No.
Any other guesses?
Hold on.
No changes.
I think it's gonna grow legs from up.
Oh yeah, it's gonna come to life. Jurassic Park.
Oh my gosh, chicken hops out. That's what I got.
Any other guesses?
Hold
I'm so sorry.
Can you just let me write down my 5 days and no kidding. I was like 5 to 8.
I was like, oh.
Give me a second.
What?
I said this poor kid you student taught.
Hey,
Okay, I need a paragraph now.
they love Miss Wallet. Okay?
Were they just saying that, or was
They
that?
I got proposed to. It was really awkward.
Okay.
What?
I was 21.
How old were they?
Student?
What's his one name?
Yeah.
Was he 18? Then okay, please.
You're a student person prompts.
Yeah, they post-it note bombed the FFA office where I student taught and asked me to prom, and I said,
Was he cute?
that's really weird, dude.
Was he? I mean, we don't know him, so it's not like we can
It
say.
seems like there's so many
You
like,
can say like he was an attractive looking minor.
this is a great way to not get your teaching license.
Oh yeah, she's being recorded.
I was saying, like, even at that point, like,
Started
I was
over.
trying to get my license. Okay, what else do we think is happening? Anybody else have an idea?
Okay, I think that if the egg is submerged in the vinegar, then the shell, then the shell will be dissolved due to the acidic nature of the vinegar, and the rest of the egg will then absorb the vinegar and become
Bro,
flabby.
have you become one with
Flabby? Did you say flabby? Again, such a
Yeah.
scientific word. Okay,
Just rough.
flip the page.
I have my whole notebook. Material.
You are going to see on that next page 3 spots where it says day 1 observation. Should be a minimum of 3 sentences. Day 2 and then day 3. What happened? So day 1 is going to be tomorrow. Day 2, this is very poorly timed, is going to be Monday. And day 3 will be Tuesday. So when you guys come in, your next 3 bell ringers are going to be to check out your eggs, which are going to keep on the counter over there, and to write down in those spots what is happening. You guys want me to explain it now? What's going to happen? What you're going to see? Or-
No.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, I don't like that.
Love it. So at this point, we need to go get our family of eggs. We need to bring, if you want to bring in all of them, you can, or if you want to decide out in the shop, you can. We need to bring in 1 to sacrifice.
Which one?
Pick which one.
I think
I don't know, bring it in.
All she told me was she said that it's in the like she said that she could either come and go for it, so
Okay.
she was she
Because
was
we'll probably just, is Coach Soul's first name Peyton?
Peyton, yeah.
He and Coach Hobbs are going to cook for us.
Okay. Which we have a full meeting today if we need to talk to them. If you need to
I think, well, Hobbs said he's not going to be there. I don't know if Peyton will be or not, but I was texting Hobbs last night about it. I think they're just looking for student volunteers, but I told Jake too. So you guys,
maybe they'll say something in there today.
yeah, and if they don't, maybe say something to Coach and like if there's time at the end to say like, hey, can we see if anybody wants to, who's not an egg, can help with
Yeah.
the banquet.
Because I mean, I think all they're talking about, because I talked to Jake, I think he said all we were talking about was the mulch sale that we're doing.
Okay.
Hey, if you need any mulch, let me know.
Yeah, talk to my parents because I don't have
Miss
any.
Wallace, sacrificing.
Sacrificing.
a random one.
Did you see?
I should probably put a name on it so I know it's ours.
Biden.
Sharpie, where are you? Joe, we need a name. What do we name?
Gerald.
Maggie, the name is where.
With a G?
Yep, we know that's Biden.
What do you want to name it?
Jimmy.
Jimmy. No.
Biden. Let me see it. Let me see it.
No.
All right, when you have your egg, go ahead and bring it on up.
Drop it in.
This egg is upset. It's getting put in, but
Can I see that when you're done, Sam?
what are we naming our egg, or what are we drawing in our egg, or whatever you're.
I can draw on a flower.
There, that's cute.
And
See
name
how the
it.
flower changes. I just barely
Might do
bumped
that
it
thing
too.
where
I
they
was
like
like,
float to the side. Have you seen that like where you
down, tomato goes.
Tomatoes.
We need that tomatoes.
Why did you have first
Because we have Marge, Harry, Lloyd, Gerald, and Kevin. And they're all more than that. No, Harry is not. This is tomato.
Okay.
Should have said Gerald.
Here, his name is Daisy. Daisy.
Where would you like it?
We're gonna line them up over between the sheep and the box. Is there anybody else?
Yes.
Me. Jumping in like Daisy. Daisy.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to drop it too.
Why does it look big in the drawer? I mean, water, I guess, but.
You'll take it around. I'll trade your guys'
With the pens.
Yeah, you can use it.
Where's the wisdom?
Haley and Brooke, do you still have one too?
Yeah.
So there's 2 more eggs.
Adios, tomato. Jimmy. How did you
Amanda.
I'm mad at you for a second.
Billy on jar.
That is beautiful. Okay. What?
Billy put them in a jar. A jar.
I'm mad at you.
I said, when me, family, are very first.
Megan, I know where it's
Oh, look, I'm in the camera.
No,
we're sacrificing
you.
TikTok dancer. Yeah, ready? Whoa.
Oh my gosh, you're doing good. And he had it shaped like right here. And I was like, oh, and then he's like, keep it.
Ew, you should have. Oh my god,
Anybody else?
not on Cameron's drawing something.
If you guys want to, underneath that hypothesis dress, write a little note that says we put it in distilled white vinegar in a pint-sized jar. 1 egg in a pint-sized jar of white vinegar. Oh my gosh, did you take a picture of that?
Here.
Very sad. Okay. Michaela, this is Amanda's.
You
You have mine. You have mine. You have mine. The one you just put away in Amanda's is mine. Well, Amanda's one you had.
What'd you do?
Hi, Ari. Thank you.
Oh, no, she didn't.
Oh, my hair is like vinegar.
But it's crazy that it got so big so fast and it went down so fast. My finger is better.
So, put your guys' names on the label.
What are you doing?
Hammer, go put it over there.
Put your name on the label and put it over.
That was not very good.
I don't know my God.
Yeah, literally. The only good.
Exactly.